When things are flowing and things are going well, do you also not really know how you're doing it?
Yes, and you shouldn't think about it too much because it's not yours. It exists between you and the camera, you and the other actors, you and the crew, you and the universe.
So let's start with Guy Madden. So Rumours, Guy Madden, very important to us as Canadians, a very important Canadian filmmaker, Winnipeg filmmaker, and of course to the filmmaking world at large.
Yes, indeed.
Tell me, you were looking forward to working with him. How did you end up working on this thing?
Well, I'd sort of inhaled all of his films, large and small, and I've loved the fact that he's done theatrical interventions. So he's found hybrid ways, with Lou Reed and Laurie Anderson to sort of bring his cinema into the theatre, which is very close to my heart. And I guess it was through Ari Aster, who is one of the producers on the film, that he said, would I talk to Guy? And I said, are you kidding? And it sort of went from there. And I'd seen Green Fog, which he'd made with Evan and Galen, and absolutely loved it. I thought there was such wild, hubristic creativity there that I thought I'd love to be part of that. And I'd packed my bag ready to shoot in Winnipeg, and then found myself in the forest of Budapest at night, wondering how I got there with Guy Madden.
How was being in the woods in Hungary?
Very dark. It was crazy. The shoot was as crazy as the result is, as you'd expect, I think, from that trio.
What did he tell you about the film he was making here?
What did he say? I mean, they all come at it. I think why they're such a great trio is they come at the process of filmmaking from such different perspectives. So you've got Evan, who is very vocal on set, and you've got Galen, who is sort of behind all the sort of the technology and slightly quieter on set, but giggles a lot, so he's a great audience. And then you've got Guy, the philosopher, who you will go and ask the big questions to, the thematic questions, who sort of is the sort of wonderfully, deliberately leaky umbrella over the whole thing. And they complement one another so beautifully. But what he did, which I was very surprised by, was he sat all of us down for 3 days around a table, and he wanted to read it. Because I think there's an unconscious process you go through when you're creating or writing or dreaming up a film, and you need to hear it come out of the actors' mouths in a way to know what it is. And you could feel them flinch and writhe as they began to understand what it was that they had written in a fever dream.
I'm trying to tiptoe around that each of the members of the G7 in this film reminded me of actual leaders of the G7, and I'm wary of how much you'll be able to tell me about that. But maybe what I could ask were there conversations between the filmmakers and the actors and yourselves about these being world leaders, and anything like that in terms of the conversation?
Definitely. I mean, they furnished us with this really awkward, strange footage from various G7 summits.
Really? They played you some stuff?
And I thought what we were being asked to do in terms of media-facing moments before the chaos begins with the bog monsters, that the G7 were doing in terms of showing cultural activities that they were doing just in the forests in Saxony. I thought they were ridiculous. And then you see what the G7 actually do when they go to various countries and engage in outward-facing cultural activities. And it is farcical and ridiculous. It's a little bit like that South Park episode where they took you through Scientology. There was no parody there. They just explained.
Yeah, remember that there was a disclaimer at the bottom that said, this is all real, this is all true, and all that stuff?
There was no need to parody because it spoke for itself. And in a way, that made the footage of the G7 made me laugh so hard and feel so deeply uncomfortable. And I realised that tonally, both of those atmospheres needed to take place in the film. It's both strange, uncomfortable, and increasingly like a documentary when you see the way things are playing out geopolitically.
Yeah, the absurdity is both in the glowing brain in the woods and the bog people trying to kill you, but also in the event itself.
In the event itself,
Yeah.
and the political speak that we hear and we know makes no sense and leads to no action.
Especially when you're facing a global catastrophe.
Yes, as we do every Wednesday.
Yeah. Let me. I'm going to come back to the meaning stuff a little bit later, but I wanted to talk to you about Disclaimer, which I also really loved. You play Catherine Ravenscroft, celebrated documentarian, husband and son. She might lose it all if a secret from her past is revealed, and it comes through a book that comes in and her life starts to unravel. You had wanted to work with Alfonso Cuarón for a while, is this right?
Forever.
Yeah.
I mean, he is one of the greatest living filmmakers, and when you get a call from him, you've already decided to engage in whatever it is that he's going to ask you to do. And when he said he was engaging in serialized storytelling, like a 7-part, I guess you call series, limited series, I was really surprised. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, when was the last time that you saw Larissa Shepitko or Tarkovsky or Bergman on the big screen? We often watch it through the Criterion channel on our screens with the sport mode turned off at home.
Yeah.
But it is still cinema. And he said, so I'm interested in making cinema for the small screen. And I think what he meant is he wanted the ideas to remain big. He didn't want to become a victim of the narrative. And so I realised that I was being asked to partner with him on a really interesting exercise in form. Yeah. And that has been an astonishing ride. And I feel so privileged to have been part of that journey with him.
What was interesting to you about the character?
The character, as always, same with the film with Guy and Evan and Galen, is the last port of call for me. It's that it's being part of the whole. And there's, as you say, there's an inciting incident in my character's backstory. And all of these things, we as human beings trying to repress, will always come back and haunt us. And it comes back to haunt my character like a Mack truck hitting her in the face, really. And it happens in the first episode. And so so a lot of that event is revealed in backstory, so to speak, or as we understand it from the way we're told stories on film. And so I thought, well, how am I going to play this? Who am I going to play? Because a lot of the drama happens in the past, and is there a character for me to play?
What do you mean, is there a character for me to play?
Well, no, a lot of the story gets told through other people's perspectives.
Yeah, an older version of you and your character and all that
yes,
stuff. Okay.
And so I wonder, well, how much am I actually going to be able to play? And so all throughout the process, we were constantly playing with how do we actually tell these sections of the story. So it was putting the building blocks of the character together, but through the other characters, if that makes sense. Because there's an exercise you do in drama school where you break down the text and you write down what every other character says about you, what you say about yourself. And every character will have a different perspective on who your character is.
Hold on, I don't know this exercise. So you take all the other characters in the play.
So just say you're doing the seagull,
okay,
and which I'm about to do, and you're playing Arkadina. Mm-hmm. Then Nina and Konstantin and Trigorin will all say things about Arkadina. But all of them will have a different perspective on the character because their relationship to her is different. Mm-hmm. And then what Arkadina will say about herself is once again entirely different. And somewhere between the intersection of all of those different points of view, those different perspectives, those, or as we say in contemporary society, their truths will exist who that person is. And so there's an interplay between all of those different perspectives. And that is what Alfonso was doing with the narrative. So my character exists in relief of other people's points of view. And so in a way, it sounds very strange, but I had to restrain myself a lot of the time from revealing too much. So I was a bit like a glass of water until later on in the series you actually you hear from her. She's silent for a lot of the time, which for me was quite difficult.
I feel like this is... I feel funny about saying this to you, but I don't know.
Go on, go ahead.
I didn't know what you sounded like as yourself.
What do you mean?
Well, here we go. I was thinking a lot about. I'm not an actor, and I'm a musician, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot lot about acting, and I really
You're going to get your ukulele out in a minute? Or?
It's a bouzouki, and,
okay,
and the ukulele makes way more money. I'm not going to lie to you, right? Yeah.
Right.
So I will get my ukulele out. I'm always very interested. I've watched a lot of things that you've been in.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm sorry.
And and your voice and your presence and your I guess embodiment is so different than every single one and so full that I didn't know who you were.
Oh, well, look, you're asking me that question?
No,
I can't possibly answer that question.
I don't have a question for you.
Oh, okay, that's it, so it's over?
I don't have you can
I
leave.
Can go now?
You're free. You can leave on your own accord. I was wondering a little bit about your process. That's what I'm interested in. I like talking to people about practicing. I like talking to people about...
Thank God. I thought you were going to ask me who I was.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
No, I couldn't possibly answer that one.
Or could you possibly ever know?
No,
you know what I mean?
Well, exactly. I mean, there's this sense, and I do think... people who have not been invited to the conversation to even be at the table, to be even just start to begin to understand who they are. I think working out what one's identity is a lifelong, very fluid process.
And it leads to, am I anything at all? And oh my God, I would never.
And look, it depends on the role you play. I mean, sometimes your function in a screenplay, in a theatrical play or whatever is a very fixed purpose. And so your character's identity needs to be very fixed in order to serve the whole piece. But sometimes, as in Catherine Ravenscroft in Quaron's thing, it had to be more fluid and elusive and enigmatic. And so I think the work reveals how you form that character and what work you do to get there.
Well, is the voice work the same every time? What's your process around voice work like? Yeah,
I had a dream the other night where that boring moment when someone starts to tell you what their dreams were. So you just have a little snooze.
This is not boring. You know this isn't boring for me.
But I had, it was just before I woke up, and someone had said, I had a friend come round, an Australian friend, and she said, "Oh, you sound really English." I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "No, you sound really English." And then sometimes when I'm in America, my children die. 1,000 deaths of 1,000 cuts when I'm speaking to American friends because I start to take on a slightly and I hate it about myself.
Yeah.
And I had this dream where someone said to me, "Would you please just find your own voice? Would you please just speak in your own voice?" And I don't know what that is anymore. I mean, because when I started out in the industry, there wasn't a lot of call for actors working internationally to speak with an Australian accent.
And did you have a very much thicker Australian accent than you have now? Or?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I mean, going to drama school, you're encouraged to, and that's not the only route to becoming an actor by any stretch of the imagination, but for me it was really useful. But you're encouraged to develop your voice, your physicality as being a flexible, malleable thing. So I've always treated it as that. And it's like when you're working on a play, on a film, you will start to absorb the world around you through the lens of what you're working on. It's like when you're reading a great novel, and you're walking, you come in, you do your interviews, but somehow 20, 30, 40% of your brain is still in the world of that book. And so the interview will be somehow something will resonate with what you've read. And the same is when you're preparing for something. So I said to this person in my dream, I said, "Oh, I'll try, but I don't know what my voice is anymore. I don't know. Maybe I know what my creative voice is, but I don't know what my literal voice sounds like."
I was speaking.
Isn't that schizophrenia of some kind? Hearing voices.
Well, I can't tell whether you mean it in terms of your own speaking voices and talking to me right now. That are you like someone who's dyed their hair so many times they've forgotten what their natural hair color is?
Well, that too, and that is absolutely the truth.
Yeah, or
I'm a swamp water blonde, if you really want to know. A friend actually said to me, I shaved my head once for a film, and she said, a very dear friend who loves me dearly, she said, "Oh, I didn't know you were a swamp water blonde." Mm-hmm. I went, thanks.
What's a swamp? Is that a strawberry?
It's not a compliment.
Okay, good. Fair enough.
I think it means mouse.
Right, fair enough. I knew not to ask you about your
hair color,
who you really are.
Yeah, you got the memo of what we could and couldn't discuss.
Well,
right?
no, I just know you like to talk about process, and I know you like to talk.
Oh, do I?
Well, I find it very interesting. I'd rather talk about process.
Okay,
too.
let's go.
I was thinking about watching this film Rumours and going, oh yeah, what does this say to me about the state of the world and where climate change is coming? And the answer to that is it's complicated. When I was watching Disclaimer, I thought, what does this say to me about how your past always haunts you? You can never get away from it. And I thought to myself, well, it's complicated. Same when I saw Tar. Well, what does Tar say to me about cancel culture and about the value of art in this time? Well, you know what? It's complicated. We don't really live in a time where there's a lot of the answer can be it's complicated. Yeah. So this is my question. My favorite film you've been in is the Bob Dylan film. Is I'm Not There. Yeah. And you play Bob Dylan at a really interesting time. Here was this guy who was a folk singer, went electric, and was seen to have all of the answers. And you have this artist doing press conferences, and people are asking him, you in the film, what is that song about, Bob? What is that song about, Bob? What is this? Please guide us. Give us some meaning. And Bob and you don't have the answers because maybe there are no answers. And is it the responsibility of the artist to give us answers? Did playing that role change your perspective on whether the art that you do or the films that you do have a message or meaning?
I never see art at all as being an educative medium. I think it's provocative. I think it's dangerous at times. I think it makes people feel uncomfortable. It invites them to connect or to look at the world slightly differently. But certainly, and we were so lucky that we got all of the outtakes of the Penny Baker documentary. So I just trawled through hours and hours and hours of him being quite out of it, actually, a lot of the time that he was on that electric tour. And what was it, 66, 68?
Yeah. Judas.
Judas. And it reminded me of how when you're working well, when things are flowing, and it doesn't always flow, and that's when technique helps. But when it's flowing, you can't remember half of the time. And there's that much circulated clip or interview with Bob Dylan relatively recently when he was talking about the earlier folk songs that he wrote, saying...
It's all right, Ma, I'm only bleeding. He says, I don't know how I wrote it, right?
I couldn't write that now. Yeah. I don't know who wrote that. And it's true, and it's because he is one of those artists, and there's very few, and that's why he's so, one of the reasons why he's so inspirational, is he has kept evolving. But I think at great personal cost.
But is that you too, when things are flowing? Not you too, you as well. when things are flowing and things are going well, do you also not really know how you're doing it?
Yes, and you shouldn't think about it too much, because it's not yours. It exists between you and the camera, you and the other actors, you and the crew, you and the universe, and that is they're the moments that when things are uncomfortable and difficult and elusive, and when you feel that you're failing more than you're succeeding, they're the moments that you cling on to and say, well, it has happened before. But I think that's also why a lot of creative people either develop drug and alcohol problems or go slightly crazy or try to self-sabotage, because they're trying to sort of get back to a place where they can flow and not become self-conscious. Because I think there is when anyone has a modicum of success, it does reveal a lot about them. And I think it becomes an impediment, actually, often to the freedom that you need in order to create, the lack of consequence.
They say that you have your whole life to make your first album, and then the album after that, you have 6 months.
Yes, exactly.
You can't get that back,
No, you can't get that back. Well, but you have to carve, you have to sort of ring fence something, which you can see. It's why Dylan performs a lot of the time with his back to the audience.
That's how he's trying to get it.
I don't know. I've never met the man, but I look at that and I go, yeah, I can maybe see why that's important to you. And when he'll do a big concert and he won't interact with the audience at all. He'll just play with his back to the audience.
So, do you relate to it? Do you relate to it? Is that what you're saying? That
No, I can see that there's he kind of needs, in a way, if he focuses too much on the audience, perhaps he's not able to keep kind of his access to the muse.
He's trying to get back to that thing we were talking about.
Yeah, and look, when I first heard Modern Times, that album, I went, who is this?
Yeah, with that weird voice.
Oh, my God. It was yet another revelation.
You're getting the TIFF Share Her Journey Groundbreaker Award from the Toronto International Film Festival.
I am. Isn't that lovely?
It's a very prestigious award. What does that mean to you to get that?
Look, I mean, I made my first international film, or my first American film, here in Toronto, and I love this festival. I love the fact that the audiences decide, what they love, and the festival circuit feels like it's really back. So I'm thrilled, but I keep thinking about that amazing. I don't know if you've read Naomi Klein's Doppelganger.
I just read it last month.
Amazing.
Yes, it's incredible.
Right? I listened to it on tape and I read it, and I still haven't imbibed it all. But, saying that, we're all very focused on our own journeys and our own failures and successes. But she says this wonderful thing that we've never made ourselves. We've constantly been making and unmaking each other. And I'm very, very aware of the journeys of women who've come before me, and the women who are much younger than me in the film industry who are making space for people like me because of the work they're doing. And, it's a much more organic thing, the notion of a journey, I think, than a linear one.
Well, we're out of time, but it's a joy to talk to you.
And you.
Thank you for making the time.
And what do you play, the bazooka?
Yeah, it's like a Greek, the Greek instrument, the bouzouki.
Oh, the
that big thing.
bouzouki.
Yeah, that thing with the thing,
The thing with the thing.
Round,
if
round
you'd said
thing
it that way.
That's why I'm a communicator professionally, Cate. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.